Hey guys, welcome back to Vince Vale Customs, and today we're going to finish up our work in progress series of the Avia Elemental Bus from Garagekits US Colors Denizens of Zo line. They were kind enough to send this over. We're doing a nice work in progress series. First video was pretty much all your prep work. Second video was we did all the flesh tones and all that stuff, the eyes, the lips, and everything. So now we're going to finish everything up here with some just basic tedious work of just painting. So my idea was in the beginning is to have her with a nice tan look to her, nice darker yellowish skin tones, orange, stuff like that. And then the idea is her hair would be a lavender white hair. But as I thought about it and I kept thinking about the project, I think it would add a little bit more fun if not only do I have the white lavender hair, but we'll put a blonde streak in the hair as well. Just to think like, okay, she's an air elemental, maybe she's ancient and when she was younger she had a blonde hair. And it turned into white over time. So that's kind of like what I'm thinking. Because the way I painted it up, it feels more of like an older, ancient, sophisticated look. So, I don't know, it's just kind of like the story I'm thinking in the back of my mind. So that's kind of what we're going to do with the hair. The horns and on the head and over in here, we're going to give them like old worn look, jewelry. I got to kind of debate on the jewelry at the very end. I think we're going to do the hair first, then the base, and then the jewelry. Now, as far as the base goes, her hair is going to be white with the blonde streak. The skin tone is kind of like, you know, this tan look. And then the base, I'm going to go with a complementary color of like this orangey skin tone, which we'll talk about later when we get into it. So this idea, whatever colors is the complementary colors of this skin tone, we're going to keep it a little bit darker. So this way your eyes stay up here to the head and hair than down here at the base. So you don't want to bring your eyes down here as much. You want to bring your eyes up here. So you want to complement the colors and stuff. So we'll kind of go over that a little bit later once we work on the base. We'll talk about the color wheel. I'll show it. But for right now, I'm just having a lot of fun with, you know, just giving her some cool white hair with a blonde streak and see how things look. Now, at the very end of the project, things could change. Sometimes I've done stuff like this where it's not a specific character from a comic book, a movie, or a cartoon, or whatever that has all the colors already done. This is kind of like whatever I want to do. So at the end of the project, I could say, well, maybe her lips need a little bit more red. Maybe her lips need to be white. Maybe the eyes need to be changed to green. You know, things can evolve and things could actually work as I go. So we'll see how things pan out and how things are going to happen. So the colors we'll be using right away is it's more of white and lavender for the hair. I might have to give a little bit of gray areas to here and there, but we'll see how things kind of work. And then what we'll do is we're going to work on the blonde streak, which is going to be basically your skin tone first, your base skin tone, and then we'll have some of the burnt sienna, raw sienna, yellow, and white, and we'll kind of use a lot of these colors to get a really nice blonde streak going in the hair to kind of like give something a little bit extra to it. And we'll get to that a little bit later. So for right now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my desk, kick on some music, just sit there and do some tedious work with the paintbrush and just work out all these little strands. So this way I can mask it off and be easier to paint it than to sit there and try to mask it off and get paint. I like to do my trim work, which I call. It's easier to hit this with a little bit of a darker, you know, lavender or whitish paint around these areas than to sit there and try to mask it perfectly, because at least this way it'll give you room for error. We'll kind of go over it a little bit of that. But let me get in there and start painting all that up, and then we'll see how this pans out. Alright, so as you can see, I am starting to do all this line work over here because there's a lot of variation and stuff. I had to actually use a different brand of white only because it's a little bit thicker. The problem with the Garagekits white is it's made for the airbrush, so trying to do these lines you might overdo it. So that's kind of an issue. So it's just a little bit of a thicker white, but still using the, you know, lavender, but it's just for this stuff. You know, I'll be able to use the airbrush part over there. That's just one thing you got to kind of keep in mind. Sometimes watery paints like this will cause more issues than harm, and you need something a little bit more thicker. But it just makes life easier. Now, in our previous video, I talked about sealing up your paint. Now, one of the reasons why I like to use the Duplicolor car paint and then you know, flatten it down is because, say I did a little too much white over an area, what I could do is I can use one of these tools. You can get these things off eBay, you know, all different types of sizes, and basically, you know, you shouldn't do it, but I kind of lick it with my tongue real quick, and if there's a little bit of a spot I kind of did a little much, I could kind of wipe it away. It kind of gives me a little bit of a room for error. because if I didn't do that sealing, what happens is if you use some watery paints, it'll kind of bleed over the edge and it kind of soaks into your paint. So you want to be able to kind of be able to do sort of an error. So if this was like black hair and you got a little bit of a mess up over in there, if you're lucky enough and you're fast, you get one of these things, you get in there and you kind of wipe it away real quick. Now one of the problems though is if you kind of wipe a lot, what happens is you start taking away that flat layer and then you start getting to your clear layer, but that clear layer is not like a perfectly car painted layer, and you might actually start wiping that away and then you start getting into your paints and you rub away. So you got to be careful of how much you rub and how much you take off. So you got to keep that in mind. But other than that, it's just, you know, sitting here doing all this tedious hair work around these edges because you want to see all that skin tone, but you still want to have all the hair there. But just kind of starting to act, you know, adding that stuff, like if you kind of cover up your area a little bit, you kind of get an idea of where we're at. So that little bit of, you know, lavender mixed in with the white is kind of creating some really darkish, you know, lavender hair. But what I might go back in is when I do this, I might go back in with some white and highlight some of these strands too. So it's just a matter of keep playing with it. There's a lot of tedious work here. We have all this hair here, we have a couple strands here, and we have all these strands over here. So just play some music and just sit there and go with it. Alright, so I did all my trim work. It sort of kind of, you know, hit some highlights and dark stuff around these parts. This right here, I kind of just did some testing to see what the blonde would look like. So I'm going to have to kind of take this blonde and kind of go into here a little bit as well. But I need to paint it all up first. Once I get all this painted up, I could go back in here and sort of kind of blend it in together a little bit easier. But for right now, it's just easier to do all the trim. So if you go back to the previous video, we talked about silly putty. So I'm going to mask this off with some silly putty right now, and then we can start painting up the hair. Okay, so I did my saran wrap wrapping, masking, and I also did my silly putty. The silly putty and the trim marks gives me an idea where I need to put the silly putty. So this way I don't try to put silly putty with like this color and this color so close together. And then when I pull off the masking, I realize I painted onto the face by accident, or I painted up too far up here or whatever. So that's why I do masking. It helps me see where the color is and where to go. I also masked up to that part of each horn, so this way, you know, I didn't. You know, you don't want to, the best part about it is try to always mask where you're going with the line, because if you go in at an angle and a weird angle over this part, and then when you pull off that masking, you have a layer of extra paint there, and then when you paint over that, you see it. So you would have to sand it down. So just try to kind of line it up. Now I did saran wrap around the bottom of the body for masking. It's a cheaper way of masking without using silly putty throughout your whole item. There's only a few things with saran wrap. Know your paints. Don't sit there and wrap your saran wrap like you're tying it to so it's going to choke it and can't breathe, because that's going to dig into your paints. if you use enamels, lacquers, or if you use car paint or candy coats, sometimes what happens is the saran wrap will stick to it, and then when you rip it up, you're ripping up all that paint that's stuck to your saran wrap. Don't leave your saran wrap on for a few days, overnight. I usually only wrap an item when I'm ready to paint it, and when I'm done painting it, all my masking comes off. I don't leave any masking on overnight because you could run into issues. The other thing too is, you know, even if you put it on loose like I did, and say you're handling the item and you're handling it, you know, while you're painting it, what's happening is that saran wrap is digging into those paints, so you got to be careful. Now, if you have any kind of like foam sheets like I have at the bottom here, if I know there's a certain paint where saran wrap will dig into it, what I will do is I will take a foam like this, I would wrap it around the item, and then I would wrap my saran wrap around it. It's just as long. The idea is to get your masking, whether you use saran wrap, tape, silly putty, so you don't overspray onto something else. But just make sure you know whatever masking tool you use is not going to rip up your paints afterwards. So it's an important thing. So now that I got this done, I'm going to get the hair set up as well. We're going to paint it all white. We're going to start adding all the dry brushing. We're going to do all that work. And once that's done, we'll work on the yellow streak. And then the hair should be pretty much finished up. Alright, so we have this masked off. And all I really did here was, this is a two-way screw. It's not really a two-way screw. It's just like a long screw you get at Home Depot. All I did was Dremel into here, which is not a big deal. You just screw this in. And at least now I can actually spray this down and let it dry without worrying about laying it on the ground or anything. Yeah, it's going to wobble a little bit, but that's not the end of the world. So we have the lavender, we have the pure white. I might add a drop of black in there for now. I'm going to mix up a basic color in my thick airbrush, and I'm just going to spray this all down, get a basic coat onto it. And then from there, probably going to do some dry brushing on it, just to kind of start bringing all that out without trying to sit there and painting streaks. The only issue though is we might have to use a little bit of a thicker white from a different brand to do dry brushing, because this is mostly made for airbrushing. It's very watery. You can put this in a cup or onto a piece of plastic and use like a paper towel to get all that, you know, let it soak up with the water. But you're still kind of wasting a lot of paint, and I kind of want to utilize this paint for airbrushing. So, you know, I'll just use a different brand just to do my dry brushing, but then I'll go back to this to do airbrushing. So it's good to have a couple different brands, especially when you want to use a technique like dry brushing. You can still use the Garagekit paints for that stuff, but if you get too much on your paintbrush and it's watery, you're just kind of soaking in water into the area and it kind of gets messy. You know, it's just one of those things. But other than that, let me mix up my cup, and then we're going to spray this all down. It's going to take a couple passes. It's probably going to get pretty dusty. You know, I'll just have to try to get most of it going. And then when I'm ready to do the blonde streak, I'm going to have to probably pop this on there and sort of plan out where that streak's going to go. So I don't mind painting all this white and most of this white and then do the blonde streak over. It's not the end of the world. Alright, so since we got our base coat done, and it's really messy, it's not really meant to be perfect on the first try, just get a coat. I have some transparency lavender, and we got some transparency Payne's gray. And what I'm going to do now is just sort of darken up some areas, just to try to give it a little pop. So this way, once I start doing my dry brushing, I don't have to worry about trying to get into certain areas. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of darken up this line here. Darken up this line there, and come under here. Just sort of help give some shade in certain areas. Not a heavy color, just a transparency. Now the Payne's gray is kind of like that bluish black, just kind of helping it a little bit more. So I see a little bit of cakiness up in here from a casting I didn't see before. So what I'm going to do is fix that, and pretty much to fix that is just kind of hit it with the blow dryer. Some paints will allow you to do this, some paints won't. They'll kind of rub off on you like rubber. So it all depends on what type of paint you're using. But Garagekits paints dry fairly well. So if you got a nice fine sandpaper, you could kind of go into this area, just kind of take that out a little bit. It's not really bad stuff, it's just a little bit of flashing from the casting I missed. Pretty much fixed. Not a big deal. Sometimes you miss stuff, sometimes you don't. And what we'll do is we'll kind of, just while we have the paint in here, not really worried if I overspray, if it kind of bleeds a bit. Because once we do the dry brush, and that's going to take away some of that stuff. Kind of put in this area in here. Okay, let's see. So this is kind of where that fine tuning comes in. You can lower your airbrush if you kind of get in some areas. Now, if you want to do this with a paintbrush, you can. If you want to sit there and work out all those lines, nothing wrong with that. You see, we kind of just darken up some stuff there, just to help pop it a little bit more. I mean, right now it's very, very lavender. We don't want it to be too lavender. We still want it to be, white. Well, an off-white. We don't want pure white either. So here, kind of a little bit longer hair. Darken in some stuff. So I might have to kind of pop out the hair and get in certain areas underneath, which is a pain with this. Sometimes these bigger items are really a pain. If you come up with a better system than what I did to hold the hair, you can. It's not really a big deal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the bottom of the hair, kind of hit it with some of this darker stuff, and then we'll come back and we'll start dry brushing. Okay, so we're going to start dry brushing. And dry brushing is easier if you have more of a drier paint, a thicker paint. So this is some Liquitex titanium white out of a tube. It's a little bit easier to use this to dry brush than it is regularly wet paints. So over here in a container, this is the titanium white. This is a little bit of some white, a drop of black, and some of the lavender mixed together. So what I want to do is I want to create like an off-white. I don't want a purely white titanium. I want to make sure it's kind of a little bit of grayish. So this stuff should go a long way mixed in with here. So you can kind of see we're already taking it down a lot. So it's definitely kind of a little bit more of a grayish color. So that's what we want to go with. Now, of course, the brush is completely caked up at the moment, and we got to get all that out. But we just want to make sure we mix up enough. So the idea is go over here with this, get that there, and we're going to kind of take a lot of this off the brush. Make sure you have a towel, paper towel next to you, an old rag, whatever you like to use. It's not a big deal. So what we'll do is we'll start on this first. And the idea is fairly simple. You want dry paint. You don't want wet. You don't want soaking wet. You want dry. So take this, kind of go over here like that. If you go onto your thing, and then you start dry brushing. And what that does is it's hitting the highest point of the hair, not the deepest point. You don't want to go in with the grain. You want to go against the grain. And you start creating highlights in your hair. It's tedious. It's just blending like this and going. And you start creating highlights in your hair without having to try to do it with the airbrush. So it's very simple. It's just that you need drier paint. Sometimes the drier paint on the brush, and the more you keep just doing this, the more you create the highlights. It's simple. Anyone can do it. It's dry brushing. You can use different colors. You can keep doing over and over. But if you go in with the grain, with the hair, the problem is you start getting inside it, and that's to defeats the purpose of it. You just want to be careful not to have too much paint on your brush, because when you do come down, if you have too much paint, it kind of pulls in and cakes in, and you start ruining your item. And you might have to go back in later and sort of, you know, hit it with a finer brush, fix up some areas. You know, what I might do is, you know, afterwards, you know, we'll see how this looks. And then what we'll do is we'll probably go in with an airbrush too and kind of tweak it a bit. Pop out some highlights a little bit. So it's just a matter of blending again, but just making your life easier, pulling out some details. So that's what I'm going to do on the hair for a bit. For the bigger hair, it's a little bit bigger, and the smaller paintbrush is not going to work, so I'll try to grab something else and try to do the bigger hair. We'll see how that works, because this hair is a little bit more finer detail, and it goes finer detail, and then we kind of lose a lot of that detail as it gets thicker, so we got to kind of come up with something. Alright, so we did our dry brush, and it's messy, it's nothing super clean, it's just the way this hair is sculpted too. So in my cup I put some pure white and a very drop of Payne's Gray Transparency, because I didn't want it to be overly white. And so I just kind of go back in and sort of highlight it a little bit. So what that's going to do is going to hit those brighter areas and sort of tone down some of that darker lavender. Not going crazy spraying, just enough, just to kind of lighten it up more, help blend it. So what that's doing is keeping those darker areas sort of dark. We're hitting the highlighted areas. It's just kind of making it pop a little bit more without what I'm trying to do is trying to hit that very highlighted in the highest part, sort of where I kind of, you know, hit it with the dry brush. And it's just help bringing it together, blending it a little bit more. A lot of times you have to get used to the sculpt of the hair, depending on how well it's sculpted, what kind of texture it has, what kind of detail. You'll start to get a better understanding of how you want to paint it up and maybe what you should do. You know, like I said, I really wanted more white hair, but I still needed that, you know, sort of that dark area still in there, and that lavender to show through. Now, other types of hair might not have as deep detail, so you got to kind of play with it a little bit differently. Some sculpts may have a more stylized wavy hair. If you're into washes, you can just paint this all in one solid white, and you can just sit there and do washes. It all depends on how you want to, you know, play with it. You know, and what I'm doing right now, if you're doing this and you feel like, well, you know, it's not really where I wanted it to be, go back and hit it with the darker colors, dry brush it, and try again. It's not the end of the world if you do a couple tries at it. But So just by doing this, we got to that white, but we still are taking away a lot of that crazy lavender that was there, but it's still there. It's not really gone, but it's still there. See, I'm spraying a fair lot. I'm not overspraying it, but I'm still spraying a lot, and we're still not losing that lavender or that Payne's gray in areas. It's still there. Not bad. So, next step. We have some pearl white. I'm not sure how well this will show up. Make sure your pearl white's mixed up pretty well. Getting a lot of this other paint that's in here out. Now I got to do this hair too, but we're going to just try on this one first. So let's just kind of drop out all the paint. So we got some pearl white. Kick on this. Alright, so here's pearl white, and basically I have to use the larger airbrush for it and just kind of get some nice coating of pearl onto this. What that does is it sort of helps pop the hair a little bit more, even though we're going to kind of dull it down. What it does is it kind of gives you that illusion that, you know, like those hair commercials where the hair is always amazing and you dye your hair and it's beautiful. It's kind of doing that same thing. So it kind of helps, like when the item turns in the in your area, those pearls kind of help pop out some of those hairs. So that's kind of like what I was going for. So I'm gonna go and do the larger hair now, and then we might go back in there and do some more like shading a little bit, and we'll see if this starts blending out a little bit better. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with where it's at. I went in and I did 1 or 2 more coats of the pearl just to make the pearl pop out a little bit more, so it might not be seen in camera, but it sort of kind of grabs a little bit more. It just took a couple coats. I hit it with the blow dryer, hit it with the blow dryer, kind of went with that. So what I want to do is I want to dull it down because you don't want it to be super shiny unless that's the look you're going for, but with this one I don't want it to be enough. If you dull down the pearl, like after we did it, it's sort of still there, but it kind of just hides a little bit. So we're going to use some flat top coat from Garagekits. I'm going to do a coating of it. Then I'm going to pull off the masking. I'm going to kind of look it over, see how everything looks. And then I'm going to let this set up for the night because I really don't want to mess with it too much because, you know, we did a lot of painting on it. Really want to let it cure. And then we're going to work on the streak tomorrow. Alright, so I did my flat top coat. Everything's looking pretty good. Tomorrow we'll kind of clean up some of these areas around the edges, and we'll figure out how we're going to do this blonde streak of where it's going to end up. But once I took off the masking, I like it. I like the way it pops out around the skin around there. I like the way it pops over here. And I think just having this extra blonde streak in there will probably pop a little bit more. So tomorrow we'll work on the blonde streak because I don't like messing with my stuff too much. I like to let it dry for a night and come back the next day and really work on it. But we'll see how this pans out tomorrow. So I did all my masking, silly putty, saran wrap, and we're just going to work on this thing. And I also pretty much lined out where I'm going to do with the blonde hair here. So it's not going to be a bright blonde, it's going to be like a dirty blonde. So we have raw sienna, we have yellow, we have our original skin tone, some white, and some burnt sienna. So these are the only colors I'm going to use to get that dirty blonde hair. The main goal is sort of kind of paint a little bit of a dark area and then go back to do some dry brushing. I might go in with some streaks of a paintbrush. It is just kind of going back and forth to get this hair. Here should work out pretty well. The back of the hair might be a little bit tricky. I might have to sit down and do some brush strokes and stuff with a longer brush. We'll kind of go over that a little bit later. And just a matter of just working out blonde hair. So what you want to do is you want to go on, like, you know, on the internet, go on Google, whatever, look up a bunch of images, and basically just find hair, just like dirty blonde hair, and look at the colors that are in there. You usually have browns, highlights, never really potent yellow. Usually the yellow is sort of there, but it's always toned down. So the yellow will help these colors, but the skin tone will help it more with that yellow and white to kind of get more of that blonde. You want to stay away from pure yellow unless it's like you're going for like a comic book character or stuff like that. So we're going to try to make it as natural as we can. Alright, so we're going to do some dry brushing now, and I need to go back to that thicker paint like I did before, and I'm going to mix in a little bit of yellow and some of the skin tone and try to get a lighter off yellow. So we have yellow tint. It's got some of that skin tone in there, but it's not that bright yellow, so it's still a little bit lighter. And then what we do is we go back up to the hair and start working out highlights. So by adding that mustard yellow that we made, a little bit of the burnt sienna, we start creating more of a natural hair than a pure just yellow throwing on there, you know. So it's got a little bit more of that kick to it. So if you, like I said, if you go on online, look up hair, you know, like just take a look at like those really shiny commercials of hair, you know, shampoos and, you know, coloring and dye hairs. If you look at it, just a picture, not the video, you can see that the very inside will be darker, the outside, then you got some other colors, and then you got the brighter ones. And it sort of just makes it pop a little bit more. But we'll add a little bit more white in there and add a little highlights too. But we have to get this hair piece as well. This one's a little bit more difficult because, like I said, those have a lot of little strands. This one doesn't. So, like I said, I might have to come back in here with a paintbrush and sort of force some streaks, which is fine. It's just that it creates a longer and a lot more work. Alright, so now, just to make it pop just a little bit more, we'll go back into this color where we mixed up, and we'll just go a little bit of a lighter shade. Just make sure we're still mixing in some of that white, and just hit it in certain areas. Like, okay, we'll make this a little bit lighter, make that area a little bit lighter, this, and maybe that there. So we got a nice little bit of a, you know, blonde streaking going and stuff. So what we'll do is we'll get set up on the desk, and we'll go in and we'll force in some colors with a paintbrush. Alright, so what I do is I have a long paintbrush here. I got all my paints next to me, some watered down. So what I'm going to go in is I'm going to try to clean up some of these streaks, add a little bit of darker areas, and then maybe get another paintbrush and sort of work out some extra highlights and just keep playing with it. I'm going to do the same thing with this. So there's no technique. It's just a matter of going in, adding some darks, some lights, work out some streaks, and then probably after that's done, we'll go back to the airbrush booth and maybe add a little bit of spraying some pearls onto it to make it a little bit shiny and maybe blend it together a little bit. So we'll see how that works out. So like I said, it's just sitting there and adding streaks and colors and just kind of forcing in some colors here and there. So I got all of the yellow pretty much done. You can see I pretty much tried to build out as much line work on this part as possible because it was kind of empty in there. So I just kind of ran with that. So next what I'm going to do is add a little bit of pop to it, and then we're going to dull it down with the flat coat. So I have some pearl white. I put a couple drops of water in there. And then I don't have any gold metallic from Garagekits, so I'm just going to use some Auto Air metallic gold. And what I'm going to do is just sort of give it a coating of pearl, just make it pop a little bit, and then we dull it back down and we'll get that where we get that sheen. It'll play with some of the lights, these strands, but it will kind of bring it together a little bit more. Alright, so I like where the hair is at. I like the variations of it. I think this should look pretty cool, but the problem is it's one globby white and one globby yellow. You know, so we want to kind of blend it together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go off camera because I got to get in close and I got to really take my time. So I'm going to work out a couple strands around here of yellow, a couple strands around there, a couple strands around here, and then a couple strands around there, and sort of make it look like the hair is kind of blending together. Because even, you know, natural hair, if you have a, you know, a streak in your hair, you still see some of the kind of blending of the hairs going together to make it a little bit more flowing. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll come back and we're going to start working on the base, and we'll talk about complementary colors and how we're going to work out the base. We're going to go like kind of like a marble effect, but with the colors that'll complement what we got there now. So it should be pretty fun and look pretty cool. Okay, so the hair is all finished up. I like where it's at. You can see I broke up a lot of the streakiness. It's not just a pure blob yellow of hair and a bright white, so you can see a lot of streaks and stuff breaks it up. So we got a lot more to go. And the next step is I'm going to focus on the base. Now, she's a very warm goldish character, and what I want to do is I want to use complementary colors on her. And when we come up to this a little bit more of a complex color wheel, complementary colors are pretty much straight across the wheel. So she is kind of goldish, tangerine color here, stuff like this, with a little hint of red. So we're kind of up in this section of the wheel. So if we come straight across, we're kind of in the purples and the blues area. So it's kind of like mostly here and mostly over in here. And I already started the complementary colors by adding that lavender in her hair with the white. So, you know, we're kind of almost kind of balancing her out in a way. Now, for her base, I want to do the complementary colors of blues and in there because mostly we're in the goldish orange area. So come across, we're kind of in these blues. Now, I know I said I don't like to use blacks in my paints a lot, but for this item, we will be using some blacks because if you look at a lot of countertops that are marble, you know, floor tiles, you know, the darker type of stuff usually has black pigments in it and stuff, you know, darker stuff. So we're going to go that route because I want to make sure the focus is on her face and hair than her base. You don't want to make the base bright and take away from the figure. That's kind of the idea. So even if we didn't do a complementary color and we just did grays and blacks and stuff, that's fine too. But I kind of want to just pop it a little bit more and have fun with it. Now, say you're working on a Hellboy. You know, he's a bright red character up top of his body, and he's, you know, whatever. Or you're working on a demon girl, and you're going to paint her red. You know, or even a superhero outfit that's got a lot of reds, like, you know, a Flash. So if you're working on the character, and there's a base, like say the character is on the street, or rocks, or grass, or something, what you want to do is, since they're mostly reds, you want to come over to the wheel and maybe do greens in the base. You know, even some green washes, just to kind of give it a little bit of a pop and it complements the character. You know, like if you look at a lot of superhero characters, a lot of red outfit characters kind of have the green eyes. And then when you come up to blonde characters, so if blonde characters, you know, they kind of come down to more of the bluish eyes. So I know, you know, this comes down to more purple, but, you know, people really don't have purple eyes, but it's kind of like there. So you kind of think about, like, you know, a lot of people who create characters, they think about, you know, the eye colors and stuff as well. So another thing to think about too is just imagine inside here is a white circle, and then we come up to here, it's like 10% with blue, 30, 40, 50 up to here, so we're like at the blue of 50, and then we come down to here to like pure black. So also think of a more complex wheel too, you know, adding these colors. So you're not just going to use this color, this color, this color. You add some white to create some 10%, and then blacks to add some darkers. So it's kind of like more complex as you go on. But this one kind of gives you a straight idea. A little bit more to this wheel without just doing the straight yellow, red, you know, green, and blue stuff. So this kind of just gives you a little bit more of a reference. So that's kind of the idea for it. It's pretty straightforward. if you're new into painting, just look up complementary colors and all that stuff in there. But other than that, I think what we just need to do is get her all set up. We'll get our part set up. We'll get the sponge ready, and it's just a matter of sitting there doing some tedious sponge work, some coloring, and just get a really nice marble looking base for her. Alright, so I sat down and I was ready to start working on this, and I realized putting this head in hair, all the stuff onto this base, sometimes she's sort of top heavy in the back. What's going to happen is, it's kind of hard to explain, but when she's in the base without the hair, she's fine. When she's in the base, she kind of goes backwards. As you can see, it goes backwards. And the problem is if you set that in as she's leaning backwards, then she might go that way. So when you set her in for good, you have to hold her forward. So this way the weight is a little bit more forward here. If you kind of do it in this way where she's kind of leaning backwards, you can see the wobbliness. See how it wobbles? So definitely when we're ready to attach her in here, she's going to have to be forward. If we have her leaning back too far, we can actually have a little bit of a tip if your desk is not level, because I do know this table is kind of leaning forward a bit, so sometimes when you have her somewhere, she kind of leans over backwards. So there's something else I want to do before I start painting it up. Anyway, I'm going to go in the garage, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to Dremel out a chunk of resin in here. As much as I can. So it's a matter of just getting a bunch of Dremel tools, dremeling out some stuff in here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some fishing lead weights. Any kind of fishing lead weights. You could go over to Walmart's, Target's, or sports store. Even if you have some in the garage, it's just lead. So what I'll do is I'll put a bunch of lead in here, and then basically from there what I'll do is I'll put some Aves and Magic Scope or whatever I can mix up over it, and then tomorrow I can just sand it down, and then boom, what I got is a little bit more weight here. Now, is it going to stop it from falling over? No, it's not going to stop it from falling over if you definitely knock it, but at least we get a little bit more weight in the front to kind of hold it down. Any kind of weight in the front will hold it better. So, adding weight in the front, and then also making sure she's forward when we attach it and not leaning backwards. Forward, not leaning backwards, and then that should be a good point where she's not top heavy or going down or anything like that. So let me go in the garage, I'll Dremel that out. We'll add some weights real quick with some Aves, and then tomorrow we can actually start painting it up once we sand down the bottom. So that's why it's kind of something, to think about when you put your kit together in the beginning. Make sure things are going on. I didn't really think of it too much until I started putting the hair in to kind of test things, and then by wobbling and stuff I realized she could go backwards. So that's just two things I got to do right now. Okay, so as you can see, I Dremeled out an area. I did hit a little bit of a spot there. It's not the big deal. If Aves kind of squeezes out there, it doesn't matter. I can kind of grind it out later. It's going to get glued in. It's all going to get hidden. The main part right here is we want to make sure that we can get the lead in here without the lead sticking up and having to sand it down. So we need to make sure that the lead fits in there. So you can see these were fishing weights. I just cut them off. I have a bunch of other old fishing weights here. Basically, lead is very soft, so you can just use the pliers and cut it. You can saw it, and anything like that. Now, is this much weight here going to keep this from falling? No, but any kind of weight down just to keep that front a little bit is going to help in the long run. So, to grind this out, you got to be careful of two things. One, you want to make sure you don't grind out and hit any of this area. Yeah, I went up pretty far, but you got to kind of know your limits and make sure you don't go through and destroy anything. That's an important thing. So you got to kind of just take your time. Anything in here doesn't matter because you can grind that out. Anything destroyed over here, you're screwed. So you got to be very careful. You have a lot of meat up here, but you don't have a lot of meat in here though because of the way this piece fits in there. Now, I use this Dremel tool to grind it out. The problem is you can't go downwards with this because then you screw up this piece and your piece rips off. You have to come at an angles. You have to come at an angle, and then you have to turn it and come at an angle. And then once you get in there, then you could kind of go around in a circle like that. So it's all about coming down in an angle because this sand wheel stuff really works well. But I did it in front of the vacuum, shop vac, because I made sure I didn't want to breathe any of this stuff in and all that. So all I'm going to do right now is I'm going to mix up some Aves. We're going to do it real quick. Tomorrow I'm going to have it sand down. It's going to be all prepped up, ready to go, and we should be able to get back to painting. So it's the next day, and I got a chance early this morning to go and sand this down, and then I painted this all in jet black, we got a nice base coat going. Now I know I said I don't like using black in my paint ups, but this is the base, and this is going to be a dark marble, so I wanted to have it as a black base than the actual red oxide primer, because I didn't want any of that really showing through too much, the fight with the figure. So the way this is going to work is we're going to do some sponge work. So if you get yourself an old sponge, or you go over to a dollar store, get a sponge, and what you do is you break it up, rip it up apart. And all I'm going to do is, the idea is this part in here is going to be like a dark gray marble. And then I'm going to kind of like touch up these little bead things around here, kind of give it a little bit of a life to it. And then after that's kind of dried up and stuff, what we'll do is we'll mask off each one, which is kind of tedious, but whatever. And then what we'll do is we'll do a bluish marble on the rest. So this is going to be like kind of dark gray marble type look. And then this is going to be all bluish. Now, I did this off camera too because I had to be very careful. So I did some airbrush work, as you can see. And I just went around and I kind of gave it a black base. What I decided to do was this was going to be kind of like a blackish kind of fade. And same thing over in here. So I think that kind of works for the figure a little bit more. Makes the skin pop out. And what'll happen is when I'm ready to do this blue marble part here, I'm going to mask this off with some silly putty, and I'm going to mask off her head with this foam. Like, I have a lot of this sheet foam for packing and shipping, so I'll wrap that around there because I'll be holding this head a lot. So I don't want any, fingerprints holding this and having my finger oils rubbing up against this. And I don't want saran wrap on there in case saran wrap rips it. This stuff kind of really gives it like a little bit of a cushion, and wrap it up and go from there. So it's going to be like a two-tone type thing, we just do a dark grayish marble. All I'll be using is white and black, going with the sponge, just kind of creating a marble effect. I might go back in with a paintbrush too and create some lines here and there, nothing too crazy. And then go back in again. It's all about layering back and forth. If you go onto YouTube, you go onto all these websites, there's plenty of tutorials on how you can make fake marble with a sponge and paintbrushes. There's tons of different ways to do it. It's just all about kind of just slapping this thing on there and keep going. So that's pretty much it. I mean, that's pretty much where we're going to go with it. And then like I said, I'll try to pop these out a little bit afterwards, make these little symbols pop out a little bit. And then the thing is, what I have to figure out is attaching this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of create this blue marble. I'm going to create this blue marble here. And when I get to the point where I think I'm good, what I might do is sort of start sealing it a bit. We'll kind of go over the sealing it. We'll kind of make it like a glossy / satin marble. And then what I might do is sort of have to attach her to the base, seam this up, and then go back in and touch that up, which is going to be a little bit tricky. But if I could get most of it looking like a marble, I could probably kind of make this look good. We'll see how it goes. I mean, if I feel that the marble looks so good when I put this into the base and not have to seam it, then I won't seam it. But it's kind of up in the air. So let me just get this going. It's very just tedious work. It's nothing too crazy. You don't have to overthink it. It's just a matter of slapping this on there, and if you're going too light with the white, you dry it up with a blow dryer, let it sit for a second, and go back in and dab some blacker grays and stuff like that. And then if you feel at 1.2 it's sort of too light or too dark, you could kind of miss some color onto it with an airbrush too. So it's just a matter of keep playing with it until you get it to where you want. So I did all my marble effect, which is kind of like a granite / marble effect. I didn't go too crazy with lines. Even though I put a couple lines in there, I kind of took them out. I didn't really want it to be too much. I want this to be a little bit different. So what's going to happen is I'm going to mask all this off now. And then what I'll do is once this is masked off and I do all the blue marble effect, it'll give me a better idea of what I want to do. If I want to darken this areas up a little bit more, if I want to do some washes and just kind of let some paint just wash in the crevices and darken it up and just sort of blend it together, because I don't want this to be pure like one color and this pure like another color and it just looks weird. I kind of want to blend it in together like it's kind of worn out and it's old and stuff. So we'll see how that goes. So I might even throw a little bit of a brown, leather brown and stuff in there to kind of make it look a little bit like stained. I don't know, we'll see how that looks. So for now, we're going to do all the blue now. So it's pretty much white, black with the blue. Maybe I'll throw some purple in there too. Just going to keep going. At times what I do is if I stop the camera and I come back, what it is I'm going over to the blow dryer and I'm blow drying. Because sometimes if it's so wet and this sponge is so wet, you're really not creating any of a texture. So you got to sometimes dry it up too as well. That's pretty much it. Just keep going. And then after all that's done, you know, we figure out how to kind of touch up these little pieces here. You know, whether it's do a little bit of dry brushing or paint these a little bit of a stained different color. We'll see how that works out. So it's just a matter of adding some color bases, this base and this base color, and then seeing if we can start touching and washing and what other stuff we want to add into it. Alright, so I got a nice little base. That's kind of where I want to go. There is some spots here and there that are showing some of the, you know, original red oxide primer showing through, but that's okay. We'll get rid of that. So what you want to do is take a long brush, a little bit wetting it down, go into wherever your white is, and so this is the front of it. So basically, if you want to create sort of like streaks in your piece, you just kind of take your brush and just go like this. Go around like that, and then you hit it with your finger, tone it down, and you just kind of like just let the brush kind of do its thing, and you sort of create like, you know, streaks going around your item. So you kind of sort of create like a marble effect. And basically what I like to do is I kind of do this throughout the whole piece. So just kind of like study marble, you know, just look at how marble works, you know, like, you know, how different types of marbles go. You don't have to overthink it either. You know, it's just streaks. I mean, like, it's rock. It doesn't necessarily have to have a specific look all the time. You know, each rocks are different. Maybe there's blues in it, you know. Now, I don't want to go too light, though, because we're going to kind of tone this down. But this sort of helps when we start adding more stuff. Now, I mean, you could go crazier with whites like this, you know, if you want to really... But I don't want to go that route with this one. Now, if you want to bring it into this stuff, you kind of do it in there as well. It's a little bit trickier to get into there, but it can work. You know, just use a little bit of water. It's tricky. So you got to do it. And then, you know, you go in with the black too. So you take the black and you follow that line like so. It starts creating sort of like marble effect, you know, so it's just kind of adding in marble effect. And you know what I'll do is I'll do some streaks like this here and there. You know, don't worry about getting it on your hands. It's not a big deal, but make sure if you get it on your hands, you're not touching anything that's finished painted. You want to make sure it's masked off. You know, I like to use my fingers. I like to have more control with the stuff, so that's why I don't wear gloves. I just make sure everything is masked off correctly. And also be careful of your masking too. Like you see how this right here is starting to flatten down. That might be because this stuff might start to show, so you got to be a little bit careful when you pick it back up that it doesn't start going through. Also know that silly putty will stick to like a smoother surface. That's why I put it on this foam, you know. So, you know, you just kind of just work it. Just kind of work in some colors, some streaks, you know. Follow your sculpt. If the sculpt is coming down here and the streak is coming down here, you got to sort of follow the streak a little bit, you know. Get in there, use whatever tools you got. Come around there, around here like so, and it kind of goes around and you follow your streak. And if you want to add more, you can kind of use some more. You can kind of go like that. And you just kind of add stuff, and you just keep going with it. You know, and you got to be kind of careful though. So, say you want your streaks to sort of follow this, like it's one solid piece. So if we come back over to here, we have to kind of follow the streak coming around there, like so. So that streak. So, you know, make sure you know where you're going with your stuff and everything. So that's why I kind of keep this piece like so, like that. So a little bit there. So say we come over here with this streak, and then it comes up around here, and then it comes up around here, and we just kind of just run with it. So you kind of keep stuff going. So I'm going to keep doing this effect, and then after I kind of do some more streaks here and there, I'll go back in with the you know, sponge. I don't want anything too bright white like this showing through. And then at some point, if I feel that this is a little bit too light, we kind of go and hit it with an airbrush. And then once that's done, we'll talk about sealing this and different types of options which you can do to make it look a little shiny and still be like marble-ish effect. Alright, so I did a quick test and I like what's going on here. So I want to bring this out a little bit more and kind of weather it. So I went to my thicker paint, which is here. You know, I just need a little bit of thicker paint. And I kind of mix it in with some of the other colors that are on here. And I'm doing very, very light dry brushing. This has got to very lightly just sort of try and bring up these edges a little bit. You know, kind of hit this stuff to make it weather it a bit. And what it does is it makes that stuff pop a little bit more. So I'm going to go around the item and do that. And then I think after I'm done, what I might do is sort of maybe mist some transparent ocean blue over the item, just to give it a little bit more of a blue tint, because I feel that even though I got blue in there, it still needs maybe a little bit of a kick. We'll see how it looks. And maybe that'll just kind of give it to where I want it. But this ocean blue is kind of, it's almost more of like a greenish blue. Yeah, it's kind of like more of an aqua blue. So maybe that might kind of pop it a little bit, but we'll see. If I have to, maybe I could just thin down the regular ultramarine blue, which I think that is. Kind of hard to see. And sort of give it a little bit more of a tint, because like I said, I want this to be darker blue, but we'll see how that works out. So it's just a matter of layering, just a matter of going in, making stuff pop a little bit, layering, adding color, and keep going. So I'm going to do this now. And then I'll probably do some of these edges around here too as well, make this kind of weathered, and just keep playing with it. Alright, so I pulled off the masking. I like where it's at. There's a slight difference. You know, you see this is blue and this is kind of more of a grayish. So to get into these corners, for now, what we'll do is we'll grab some browns, we'll grab some blacks, women's makeup, and we'll kind of just go in these areas, give it a little bit of a variation. The brown gives it a little bit more of a, a little bit of a rust look in there, like it's kind of worn, breaks it apart a bit. Kind of throw some around in here, and then you can kind of wipe it off. Give some of that look in there. Anything to sort of kind of break it apart. Kind of like that a lot now. We're going to have to seal all this, of course, but this just kind of helps just a little bit. Go back in with the black, kind of hit this area here a little bit. I really want to try to take this down as much as I can just to kind of break it up more. So we're going to really go in with some more black. Just kind of really just try to throw it in there. See, that's kind of looking pretty cool. I like that. Darkening this up so this is kind of a different color and just working. Sometimes you just got to play with this stuff. Things evolve, they change. Alright, so now that we sort of did that a little bit, which I like it's giving it like a nice old worn look, let's try go to our white paint here. Let's now because there's a powder there, it might help it a little bit, but we'll see. Let's grab a little of the black. Stuff dries up fairly fast, so and we got a little bit of black, white, get a nice little gray going, take it down. So to try to bring out those lines a little bit more. It's not about putting crazy amounts of pressure, it's just a matter of lightly letting it go and just let the bristles sort of grab the item with dry paint. Yeah, sort of breaking it up a little bit more. Got a lot of dirty colors in there. I like it. A lot of the little small details like this kind of really help pop your item. And that's what dry brushing pretty much is. Just kind of letting the dry paint sort of grab and hold on to those areas. So, we brought it out a little bit more, and we got a variation. So we got gray and we got a blue, and it kind of pops, and it's not really too potent. It's kind of dark. It kind of sits in there. So next step is I'm going to dry this up. So we're gonna seal it next. I'm going to use the Duplicolor Car Paint Seal, which I used before. That pretty much will give it a nice shiny look. And then what we'll do is we'll dull it down with the Garagekits flat top coat. So it'll dull it down just enough where it sort of looks shiny marble, but it's not like flat. It's got kind of like a little bit of a, think of like a kitchen countertop, but not as smooth, you know, a little bit rougher. So that's kind of what I like to do, is seal that up. So let's get that sealed up, let that dry. I think after I do that, maybe we could probably even, oh, I got to do the rope around the figure. I got to do that rope. So we'll do that rope, and then I think we can actually attach her in there, and then we can start touching up some of the areas between the masking and her skin tone. Alright, so I did my sealing on this. Just basically just, you know, put in an airbrush booth, seal it up, then dull it down. So we got a nice good coat on it. It's a little bit tacky still, got to kind of dry. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to go in here and just clean this up off camera. And then I'm going to go over here and blend this part over here, because this kind of like sort of comes up around here, and I couldn't get it perfect around there. So it's good just to go in there with the airbrush with the same, paintbrush with the same colors, get that cleaned up, and then after that we're going to figure out the rope. And I think once we figure out the rope, and this sets up for the night, we can really focus on the jewelry and the horns and pretty much the feathers too for our head, and we're kind of like getting down to the end of it. So right now I'm doing the rope around this, so I figure a nice dark brown rope would look good with maybe a little bit of highlights, a little bit of dry brushing afterwards. But for right now, I'm doing a base coat, and I did a test over here. Sadly, at times, airbrush paints are really made for the airbrush. They're not really made for your paintbrush if you need to do a thicker coat. You can sit there and use airbrush paint. You could do like a nice light coat on there with your airbrush paint, which is kind of like a wash if you think about it. You let that dry, and you could do another coat, and then you could do another coat, and you can keep building up, but I'm too lazy right now, and I don't want to do that. So there will be times when you do need thicker paints of other brands. It's just part of the hobby. You have to go with that route. So this is a Vallejo Model Air, which is still an airbrush paint, so it's kind of still a little bit thin, but this is a Vallejo Pants Acer, which is nice and thick. It's a leather belt. So I'm mixing these two up in here, like so. And what that's doing is it's just giving me a darker color to go down. So what all to do is you get yourself a paintbrush, you get some of this color, and you just sit here and you just throw on a nice base coat. It goes on thick, and it makes your life a little bit easier. So basically all I'm going to do now is just kick on the music, and I'm just going to sit here and do all the rope down here. I'll do all the rope down there. When we come back, we'll do a little bit of dry brushing or some highlights to make the rope pop a little bit, but nothing too crazy, with some of this raw sienna from Garagekits. But that's just the nature of the hobby. So you will come times when you do need to use thicker paints for paintbrush work if you don't want to do layering. But I'm not going to film this too, because it's just a matter of sitting here painting it, and then we're done. So we'll be back once these are all set up. So we got the rope all painted on, and I want to just give it a little bit of highlight. So we're going to take some of that raw sienna and some of that other color that we used as a base, and I'm going to put in this really messed up paintbrush, and I'm just going to sort of add a little something to it, not much, just kind of go down. Adds a little bit of a highlight, gives a little bit of a wear. So the darker stuff that's kind of in the crevices sort of stays, and then you lighten it up a little bit. So it just makes it look like rope a little bit, nothing too crazy, as you can see. Just be careful of what you're doing, try not to get it on the blue without hitting the camera. And you give it a little bit more of a highlight on that area, and that is pretty much it. So I'll do the other side, and then we'll come back. There might be some stuff I'm going to do onto the base real quick, and then we'll start focusing on the horns and the jewelry. Okay, so on the base, these little pieces down here, I want to make them pop just a little bit, but not like go overboard. So there's a iridescent blue that Garagekits has. It's really great stuff. Think of like the iridescent sort of like almost looking like a seashell, like when you paint the seashell color. So like the blue has a little bit more blue into it. There's a green, purples, and stuff like that. So we are going to get some of this on here. I just need to pop the top a little bit so some of this pigment comes out. Alright, so a little trick to kind of help with some of the Garagekit colors, if you want to thicken them up a bit, you can squeeze that out, grab a paper towel, and sort of take up the moisture, and you leave a lot of the pigments kind of behind. So we'll take our paintbrush, which got a little bit of the brown paint in it, which is not a big deal. And what we'll do is sort of give these areas a little bit of a washing. Try to stick onto that little stuff. So it's going to make them pop just a little bit. Nothing too crazy. We're not trying to get, you know, a really crazy lot on there. If you go with a couple layers, yeah, you can really make them pop. But we're just going a little bit just to give them a little bit of a different look. That's it. Nothing too crazy. But in certain lights, it might catch the light a little bit more on these pieces. But it's very light, like I say. You can, if you do a lot of this layering, you can really make it look like a seashell / pearl almost, you know. But just adding a little bit of a wash, getting some of those pigments in there, just helps it pop a little bit. So that's all I'm going to do around those pieces, just to give it a little bit oomph to it. And after that's done, we'll get to the horns. So it's time to attach her to the base. Now, what I like to use is BSI glues and their epoxies. It's good hobby stuff. I've never had a problem with this stuff. The fumes are not as bad, and the stuff mixes up really well if you mix it really good. So I have a little cup, you know, I got my mixing tool, and what I like to do with this stuff is I put a drop of like transparency Garagekits, whether it's blue, reds, or whatever. The reason why I put one little drop in there, it just helps me mix it correctly, because the problem is if you put these two equal amounts into your container and you mix it, sometimes you never know, there might be an area here you just sort of miss. And by adding one little cup of one little drop of a pigment like a blue, it just kind of helps like mix it together, and it makes it easier to see that you did it correctly. So we'll kind of go over that in a second. But like I said in the beginning of the video series, do hatch marks in your area, because what this does is it lets the epoxies or the glues cater and fill in this area, then squeeze all the way up and come up top. So when you pour in your epoxy and you put this piece down, what happens is it'll go into those hatch marks instead of squeezing up around this area. Because if this squeezes up in that area and you go to wipe it off with your finger or some kind of a tool, it's so tacky and it's so like potent to grab the stuff. It'll be all over your finger. You might rip up the paint. And then if you're not paying attention and you kind of grab her over here, or you grab this here, next thing you know, you put fingerprints and you're messing up the paint and stuff like that. Also, I haven't had a problem with this epoxy kind of like giving any kind of a bad fumes or any kind of reactions to paints. If you use super glue, which I'm not saying you can't, the only problem with super glue is it creates a very potent cloud on your paints. Like if you just poured super glue in here a lot and you put this piece down and then you walk away, the fumes of the super glue come out so harsh and so potent, it would actually start clouding up a whiteness around all this dark base. So super glue is very, very potent. Now, with super glue though, you can use an Instaset or you can use a zip kicker, but I still suggest staying away from super glue with your statues. What you would want to do is you want to get more of a hobby glue. This is BSI gel glue. So you could actually gel this inside if you wanted to, instead of using the epoxy, and then use that Instaset and it would set it up perfectly. But the reason why I don't like using glues on this is because the glues, they cure, but they cure very like hard, crackly type. It's almost like a hard resin, they sort of, you know. And if you're not careful with that type of glue and you grab this a certain way, you can almost crack that glue. It's kind of weird if the thicker you use it. It's great for like, you know, repairing fingers or attaching a little tiny area to a statue. But when you want to do something supporting like this, I would suggest more of a, you know, epoxy or Aves or Magiscope, whatever you want to use in there to do that. Now, I know other people have said use Gorilla Glue, use all that stuff. I try to stick to the hobby stuff mostly. I try to stay away from any stuff that's like at Home Depot for like building on houses, only because sometimes like, you know, reactions and residues, you know, I've used this stuff enough that I know it's not an issue. So what we're going to do next is I'm just going to squeeze out some onto this cup, and we're going to put a drop in there, mix it, we'll pour it in there. And I just have to make sure she's forward and not backwards, because you can see she wobbles in and out of the base, so we want to make sure she's forward. And then once it cures up, it only takes so much time. You don't have to worry about using any kind of zip kicker or Instaset with this. Once it's cured up, we'll let it sit for like a good hour or so before you even start messing with it and stuff. And then we can start doing the rest of our item. Now this is a new package. I actually have my old package sitting up over here. Give you guys an idea. So I only have a little bit left in these, so I just kind of make sure I can get it down to the bottom. And that's pretty much it. So let's get this mixed up. And I'll put the drop of blue in there, and then we'll attach her. And then that should be it for attaching the base. Alright, so I put my 2 equal amounts in there and just put a drop of blue, color, anything, doesn't really matter. You don't need to go crazy, the transparency stuff works pretty well, and just kind of mix it up. So you can kind of see it doesn't really make a huge difference, but it's still going to help. So I like to make sure this stuff mixes up really, really well. You don't have to put a drop in there, especially if you want it to be semi-clear. Kind of does help. I do use this epoxy stuff sometimes when I want to bond like a clear item to a other item with maybe like a little bit of a drop of red or orange for like flames, stuff like that. It's not perfect for doing any kind of clear bond work, but a little drop could go a little way. Always make sure you mix equal amounts. There's nothing worse than actually not mixing it correctly and or anything like that. If you put too much of one and not enough of the other, you can really ruin an item by it'll just be leaking on you because it's not actually bonding and doesn't have that chemical reaction. I mixed up more than I needed only because I wanted to, 1, make sure I get enough in there, and 2, I was kind of at the empty end of that bottle. So now if you're gonna, if you have any kind of like breathing issues and stuff, make sure this is a well ventilated area. But this stuff isn't super bad. Always make sure you go around the area, get every little crevice. Make sure you have some flat cups too. Because if it's got like a weird little notch at the bottom and you're mixing it and you're not getting in there, that can cause issues too. Just mix it good. It'll start getting warm in your hand too, so that's another thing. So basically we're just going to pour that in there like so. Really don't need much. Because even though I did those notches, you can pour too much in there where it fills up the notches and still squeezes out. So I think that should be fairly decent. Just to make sure, we'll push some over here, around like so. Let's get around the areas. Yeah, that should be perfect. And the next step, we take this, squeeze it down, and hold her forward. Alright, so I'm just going to hold her forward like this for now. Just make sure she bonds pretty well. And a good thing to do is to have this cup here, and this will kind of give you an idea once this starts hardening up. Like when I start picking this up and this wood piece is stuck to it, I know that this is bonding up pretty well. So I'm just gonna hold this here, pop on some music, and then hopefully after this is set up, I can just go off camera, just maybe touch up any little marks that might be around there, and then we can start working on the rest of her. Alright, so it's been like 4 minutes, and you can see this stuff is already, it's like hot to your touch, and it's like not coming out of this thing. So we definitely mix it up right, and it's definitely bonding pretty well. I'm just gonna let this sit for like an hour or so anyway, because I got some other stuff going on. I like to make sure things are not rushed, even though this is pretty much like bonded and it's tight, and it's still fairly soft, and if you really wiggle it and you kind of play with it, you can still rip something out, as you see. So give it time, give your products and items time to cure, make sure you don't overdo it, but at least now I know this is bonded up pretty well, and we're looking pretty good. So I'll let this sit up, and then hopefully we can start masking off the horns to get those going. Alright, so we're going to go back to some tedious work now. So all I did was I mixed up some white and raw sienna, and I just did a little bit of the trim work around the horns. So now I'm just going to mask it off with some silly putty, and then we'll start painting those up. So we're all masked off, and all I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of giving it a coat of basic white. Not going too crazy about it, because I don't mind if any kind of the original color shows through on this right now, because we're going to do some layering. So the idea is I want to give these horns sort of like a really oldish look. The pieces that are on top that are holding the horns, the idea is those are not going to be, they're going to be like holding it, so they might be like a metal. Maybe I'll do something else with them, not really sure. So what I like to use is transparency leather tan for the horns. It's got a really nice like off kind of brownish yellow. So we're going to kind of hit the areas down around the horn. Don't have to really overthink it right now. Just kind of get some color down. Try not to overspray the transparency stuff when you have a masking like this, because it can bleed through. Just kind of hit it. If for some odd reason you get any kind of like little bleeding, just kind of wipe it off real quick. It's not going to harm the sculpt, because we're going to... At any point, if you feel that it's bleeding too much on you, you got an issue, just heat up your item. Alright, so what we'll do is we'll spray out what's in here, and we'll put a couple more drops of the white. Trying to create like a blend effect. Got a little bit of the color there. Alright, so we're starting to create sort of a look to it. It's got kind of a blend, it's kind of old. What we'll do is, let's see, we'll find, where was it colored? We got chestnut. So we'll try a little chestnut in there. It kind of gives a little bit of an orangey look. Not go too crazy with it. Alright, so I'm going to clean out my brush. We'll come back with a paintbrush. We're going to create like a little bit of marks, and then we'll kind of do another layering. Okay, so this is where you can kind of have some fun with it. You can mix up some of your white, some of your transparency leather tan, and you can sort of kind of create some streaks in here. Sort of just kind of break it up, give it like a little bit of a like kind of like a broken up effect, like it's got some stuff. There's some texture on here too. If you want to go that route and sort of bring out the texture, you could do some dry brushing. I kind of like to create like little streaks on here. So kind of get down here a little bit. And if you want to break it up a little bit more, get some of the tan. Make it look like it's old, worn metal, all bone, I guess you can say. Tusks. And go back to the white. Just keep, just throwing it down. Alright, and then from there, go back to some stuff. So we go back, we'll do a couple drops of transparency leather tan, a couple drops of the chestnut, a little bit of a darker type of look. Kind of really hit this area around there a little bit more. Spray that out. Now with something like this, I don't mind mixing the airbrush cup with the two colors. You don't want it to be purely white. Alright, let me kind of think about what I want to add to it next. Okay, so I got some pearl white in my cup, so just kind of give it a little bit of a sheen, I guess kind of like an ivory look, yes, a little bit. Nothing too crazy. Alright, and now we're going to hit some gold toner on it. Just kind of keep adding some colors here. Gold toner kind of golden up the area a little bit so it's not just brown. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to really hit it with the gold toner now. And with the gold toner mixed in there, I'm going to go back to a couple drops of white. And there's a little spot over here I missed. Kind of get that caught up a little bit. Yeah, we don't want it pure white, but we don't want it just like brown. We want to give it that weird, worn out look. It's not about overspraying, just about adding some colors. Yeah, the gold toner really goes a far way with this. I really like that. So we're going to go back to a little bit of the pearl white, just a drop mixed in with regular white. Okay. So we would, at this point, it seems to be a little bit risky of overdoing it, so we want to dry it down. So I got a little bit more white in here, kind of brighten it up a bit at the end. Same thing with these little pieces. And drop or two of transparent leather, a little bit of gold toner. Like I say, I'm not really, there's no really set formula. It's just a matter of just keep adding some colors, trying to get it to where you want it. Try to darken up some of that up there, a little bit underneath. Spray it far away a bit, kind of miss some little color here and there. Yeah, we're starting to get that old look I'm going for. They don't have to be pure white. They don't need to be, I mean, if you don't want them even to be this color, you can do an off color. You can give them a, you know, grayish tusks. You can, if you're doing something really crazy, you can go browns. You can do old bone, which is kind of like a grayish green color if you want. Garagekits Colors makes a really cool aged bone and sandstone colors. These two colors right here are pretty cool. You can use these for like skulls and you know, bones if you want to make them old, and then you could do washes of other colors on top of them. I'm just trying to keep her more of a, you know, that just kind of a, just more a little bit aged, I guess, like so. I like where that's going up top. I don't want them too white to kind of fight her, and I don't want the hair to kind of like fight these, but I just kind of want them to be sort of, alright, one more drop of, let's see, white in here, let's say. Getting that basic color I want. We'll hit this a little bit here. A little bit there. Yeah, see, I like it being a little bit more brownish and sort of out there. Now it's kind of hard to tell because, you know, we have the silly putty on here and all that stuff, but it's definitely kind of where I want to go with it. So having it too white on here is definitely not to go. So you want it more yellowish, brown. Making sure we get underneath these areas. Don't want to miss anything too important. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of blow dry that, make sure everything's looking good, and then maybe kind of walk away from it, see if I need to add anything else. Alright, so I want to add a little bit of deeper, darker cracks up top, so I mixed a little bit of burnt sienna with the transparent leather. So I'm just kind of adding some little bit of stuff up top, just give a little bit darker cracking stuff up there. Of course it bled all over the place, but that's alright. Not the end of the world. Now, at any point after I pull off the masking, once it's all done, if I need to go back in and add anything, I can. If I think it needs to be a little bit lighter, or if I need to add more striations or anything like that, but I think that looks pretty decent. Alright, so this one sort of needs a little bit of a punch piece, kind of blend out. There we go. So that's kind of some aged look to it. Nothing too, you know, kind of like it, more like a teeth almost. So pull off the masking and we'll see what's next. Alright, pulled off the masking. I like the color a lot on her. So this is where that whole clear coat and you know, comes into effect in overspray. So if you have one of these tools, you know, like these little things, I just kind of lick it, and if you go over here and you sort of pull it out. So there's a little bit of over bleeding here. You know, you could go back in with your original color and tweak it, but that's what helps with all those extra layers I do. So sometimes you'll get little mess ups here and there. Go in there and sort of pull that color out. Same thing over here. That's why you have different sizes of this stuff. So you can kind of get in there. Just pull the color. Now I'm going to go in there and do some shading too. Maybe with some pastels if I have to later. But for right now, it just gets that color out. And it wipes it away. There's always touch-ups at the end. But the horns up top looked pretty good. Kind of like how these kind of turned out, as you can see. So next step is I'm going to try to decide on what color to do these pieces up here. And then we got to focus on the jewelry. Okay, so I was doing some tests to see what I wanted to do with these horn pieces that are holding them, And I'm not really a fan of the idea of gold on my items too much. I kind of like silver and old worn metal. It's kind of just a preference. So what I do is I have just some light steel from Vallejo, and then I got some Warlock bronze from Citadel, which is kind of like a really cool darkish copper almost. So what I'm doing is I'm doing a base coat of the light silver on it, and then I start washing the bronze stuff onto it, and I create this worn old metal effect, and I kind of like that for the item. So for the horns here, I'm going to do that. The horns down on her necklace as well, I'm going to do that as well. I'm debating yet if I'm going to do the whole necklace like that, only because those earrings that I found for her are sort of shiny. There is some chrome stuff that I have that might work. Maybe what I'm thinking of doing is kind of like maybe the necklace, the back of this is like this, the same metal as this, but these pieces up here are like this really bright chrome that will match the earrings. That's kind of what I'm thinking about for now. So we're going to just keep going ahead and just do this like worn metal effect type on for the horns. I think that kind of brings it together a little bit. And then after that, we'll kind of think about the necklace. And then we also have to do the feathers. I keep forgetting about those for her hair. Okay, so at this point what I'm doing right now is I'm using this Vallejo dark steel. It's a little bit thicker paint than any of the Garagekits metallics, because anything that's watery, I'm too afraid to go with a paintbrush around edging, because what will happen is if there's too much watery paint on your brush, all of a sudden the drop will go down and bleed into your skin and stuff. So you want to use something thicker that's kind of more of a, not really milky, but kind of like a little bit more pasty like milk, a little bit above that. And this stuff is kind of like at that point. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to do all this trim. I'm going to do a little bit at a time. Not even going to film it. It's just a matter of sitting there, doing a little bit. If I feel I'm getting tired or I'm getting lazy, I'll put it away, work on something else, come back, go back to this, and keep going. Then after that, there's a couple options. One, do I just paint it all in this dark steel and then maybe use Garagekits iridescent colors on it and give it more of like a steel slash glowing look like I did with the bottom of these pieces here? Or do I use this Molotov liquid chrome stuff that is very really cool chromey looking stuff? It's like an ink. You kind of see how shiny it is. But the only problem with this stuff is, one, it's very toxic. Two, once you paint it on an item, you really can't touch it or mess with it even after like a couple weeks, because like your finger oils kind of break it up. And the other thing too is you don't want to airbrush with that stuff. It's very, very toxic. So I'm toying with the idea of using the iridescence on metal looking chain to kind of make it look like it's metal, but it's got kind of a glow to it. So I don't know, let me just get all this trim first and kind of get this all going, and then from there I'll decide what I want to do. I mean, I might even actually paint all this stuff in with this dark steel, because even if it's painted in, I could still go on top of it with this, or I could go on top of it with the iridescence. So I don't know yet. We'll have to see what's going on. And then these three things here are going to probably be like pearls, or something like a pearl with the iridescence. So it's just a matter of, let me get a base coat on it, and then we figure out the next step. Okay, so I went over this necklace with the metal yesterday. It was very tedious, and boy, was a hell of a lot of work. So I would do this section, take a break, do this section, take a break, and just keep going around till I got it nice and clean. And I was doing some testing here. I have iridescent purple, and I also have iridescent blue. So I was trying the purple on here, because what it is you have to put the iridescent into like a cup like this and use a paper towel to get all the liquid, so you can get a lot of this pigment if you want to use the brush. I was trying the purple. I'm not really a fan of the purple. So here's some of the blue, and this was the blue I used at the bottom of the base. So I think if we put blue on here, what this is going to do is it's sort of turning into like a shinier metal. And it's not like gunmetal, it's not like a crazy chrome. It's just giving it like a metal that's kind of sort of like, think of it as like enchanted metal, I guess. I don't know if you want to go that route. So I think I'm just going to use the blue. The purple really wasn't going where I wanted it to be, but this blue seems to pop a little bit more on it. So as you can kind of see, maybe you catch it in different lighting, it just makes it pop a little bit more. So all I'm going to really do is I'm just going to kind of go over this with some of this pigment of the blue. You just got to try to get it out of that bottle. I'm just going around here and just making this look a little bit different, you know, just by adding a little bit of that instead of just metal, because it, like, you know, she's an elemental. You figure this kind of chain might be a little bit more magical, I guess you can say, if you want to think of it like that. You don't have to go crazy around the edges. It's fine with just the top. Now, if you wanted to, you know, if you really wanted to go crazy, you could do like iridescent green on this one, blue on this one, purple on this one, and you could change all the iridescence if you want to go crazy like that. But we're not going that crazy. I just kind of like this, making this look a little bit more different, like a magical metal. So just by adding this iridescence, it changes your color. Now, once I get all this done, because I'm going to go through and do all this now, we'll come back and we'll work on these, which are going to be sort of like pearls, sort of with the iridescence mixed in with some other colors. I don't want them super bright white. I want to make them a little darker, but add the iridescence into them and go from there. And I think that should make the necklace pop. I'm going to leave the chain, though, metal. I'm going to leave that regular metal, and we're going to focus on these being like, you know, like this glowing iridescent look to it. So it's just a matter of playing with the item, trying different colors, seeing if you like stuff, washes, stuff like that. So let me go ahead and finish all this, and then we'll come back and we'll work on these. And then after that, we'll kind of go over it, see if there's any details. We'll finish up the feathers and the little hair piece too, and then that should be about it. Okay, so with the necklace being all done, we can focus on the rest of this. Now, these pieces, I'm going to mix up some blue and some white. They don't have to be completely the same. We could kind of, you know, mess with these a bit. We're going to mix in some of that interference. Like I said, I don't want them pure white, but I don't want them... So we might have to go a little bit darker blue on these, see how that looks. Yeah, so the idea is just kind of wash them around. Got to make sure they don't bleed. So just kind of like, you know, throw a little bit of the wash on there. Try to just kind of let the paint kind of go wherever. And then you start creating like a weird look to them. They'll look like little marbles with different striations and stuff. So just kind of darkening them down a bit. Just going to keep doing stuff like this. So and they don't all have to be the same. So if you really wanted to, you can just sit there and add different colors. You can make one, you know, red, one green, black marbles with white in them. You do whatever you really want to do with them. So I'm just kind of like letting the brush kind of do some weird stuff to it. So I'll kind of try to go with a little bit of more of the darker blue. Now I don't want a pure blue out of the bottle like it is. They're kind of looking cloudy, which is actually not bad, actually, now that I think about it. Sort of little cloudy marbles. But I don't think I'm going that route with the item, so... So we got some kind of color in there. Let's find... a little bit of burnt umber. A little bit of burnt umber. Let's see what happens. Mixed in with some blue. A little bit of burnt umber will make a little bit of a Yeah, a little bit of a darker color to it, which I want to go with. It almost looks black, but it's really more of a darker blue. What I'm going to do is we're going to keep doing stuff like this to it. And then we're going to add some of that interference on it afterwards. Again, make them pop. Okay, so I'm going to keep kind of doing that, kind of create like weird little marble-ish looks to them. You know, I got to get in underneath here, you know, so I can't have the camera in the way. Try to darken up some of the underneath parts that I might hit. So let me go and do some more of this, and then we can do some washes on the interference on it, or the iridescent, and see how it works. Alright, so I went ahead and sort of kind of gave them marble-ish looks, just sitting there hitting with the paintbrush and stuff. So now we go to our iridescent again, and we make them shine like they're marbles. So it makes them pop a little bit more, so they look shiny now, while these are dull. Now, I don't know if the camera's pulling it in. I might have to do a little bit of a gloss coat on just these marbles, which is fine. Like that. Yep, that makes them pop a little bit more. Like I said, don't overthink it. Just kind of let the paint and stuff go wherever. And they look marble-ish like. Alright, I like that. So that looks pretty good. So, at this point, usually what I do is kind of go over the item and do any touch-ups. I'm going to try to darken up some of these horns real quick. We'll see how that looks. And then, you know, all this pearl. So you know what? Let's try something right now. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work. Let's take some of this interference blue. Let's make her eyes glow a little bit. Let's... I like that. Okay. That's okay, they glow a little bit more. I like that. Okay. I'll have to gloss that up a little bit, but just making, see how things evolve as you work on your items. Sometimes you're doing somewhere else and you're like, yeah, let's try it over here. That looks pretty cool. Alright. So let me get set up, we'll do some touch-ups, and we're going to start focusing on the feathers, and the hair will finish up. So at this point right now, we got to do the feathers. So what I did is I put the feathers up there, so this way I know which one goes where. I'm going to probably number them too real quick, you know, underneath here. I'll probably just grab a marker and probably just put like, you know, 1, 2, 3 through 6. This rope up here, I'm going to paint the same color as the rope around the base, just to kind of like, you know, uniform them a little bit. As far as the feathers go, I'm going to be mixing up a little bit of green, blue, white, Payne's gray, maybe a hint of brown in there too as well, and just sort of kind of create feather streaks. So the idea is the center will be the darker color, and then as the streaks go out, it'll be lighter white, and that's going to be the feathers. I don't want to focus too much on them and go too crazy. I don't want them being too blue or too green. Just kind of mix up some colors here and there. We'll focus on one feather first. We'll kind of give you an idea of how that's painted up, and then I'll go ahead and do the rest. This over here is going to be the same rope as this over here for the hair piece. And then after that, it's touch-ups. And then most of the touch-ups is I'm going to use some of the pastels, well, the women's makeup, and do a little bit of shading between these horns around the neck pieces in there. And then go over the whole item in case I miss anything, in case I scratch something, or if I put a mark somewhere. Kind of clean up some stuff like that here and there. And then that should pretty much finish it out. So as far as painting this feather up, it's fairly simple, at least the way I set it up. Just grab yourself some of the thicker white, which is a little bit easier. Just throw some white all over the item. Don't think about it too much. And then you mix some of your blue with some of the burnt umber. And you can kind of just start going here and create little streaks in the feather. There is some detail in there, so you could kind of work it a bit. Now once you have sort of a base coat going, you can kind of maybe hit it with the hair dryer. I have some green, I got some blue, got some burnt umber, and just sort of kind of just use the brush stroke, kind of work in those areas. So I got sort of a base. It's really, really wet at the moment, so I'm going to hit it with the blow dryer real quick. Now you can do it either way. If you want the outside of the feathers to be sort of, you know, darker and the inside white, you can do that. But most of the time, you know, you kind of get these little feathers kind of darker like that. So it's all about just sitting here, just doing some strokes. Go back to some of the white, kind of hit it in there. Now if you want to, you could go in there and just paint the whole color as a solid color, and then you can go in and dry brush. I like to kind of just do all the strokes. Now at some point, if I feel that there's too much white, you know, just go, you can kind of go in there with the airbrush, mess with it. But I don't want it too bright, but adding a little extra color here and there kind of will help it. And if you want, you try to wipe it off a bit. You just kind of play with the feathers. Once I get a sort of rhythm going of what colors I'm using and how to go about this, then I'll be able just to kind of fly through the rest of them. And then what we'll do is grab a little of the darker colors, kind of go back into the center. So sort of kind of creating a little feather-like look to it. So as long as you stick with those three colors that you're planning on using, you can kind of get them all going. So I'm just kind of showing you how I'm kind of creating the feather this way. Just letting it blend. I'm not using any kind of mediums or any kind of stuff. I'm just using the wet paint, water, and just running with it. So start creating sort of like a feather, and I think this would look good because I'm putting it up against it right now, and it's sort of a darker feather. Now, the other thing too is you got to be careful. You got to hit all your other areas too. So I'm looking at it, and I kind of like that. It's lighter like the hair, but it's got like the greenish bluish tint. So this way, it kind of runs with it. So that little light, you know. So if you hit a little bit of a light area here, you know, like a feather, like, okay, so this part might be a little bit whiter, this one here, you know, a little bit there, and you kind of just keep playing with it, and you create some kind of a feather. So now that I got sort of the look I'm going for, I think these will look good in her hair, and are not too taking away from any other colors. I'll just sit here, I'll go through all these, just sit here, tedious work, just sitting here with the paintbrush going, and then if I need to do anything else, we'll go over that, but I think this should be exactly where I'm kind of going with. But I'll have my magnifying glasses on, and I'll try to do all these streaks and just kind of run with it. Okay, so she is all finished up. I went over it one more time just to make sure there was any issues. If you take your time, you're new to the hobby, just take your time. You know, just do a little bit here, a little bit there. Make sure your item's dry. Make sure you're not manhandling it. Keep like soft towels around the area so you can keep the item on soft towels. And keep your hands clean all the time. And if you go that way, and by the time you're getting done, you won't have to go back and touch stuff up. You know, just take your time. That's all it's about. It's just not rushing things out. If you're frustrated and you don't know, you know, things are not working, take the item, put it on the shelf, cover it with a towel or plastic bag, or put it in a cabinet. Walk away for a day or two, come back with a fresh mind, and it should help you a little bit better. It's just, you know, when I first got into this hobby too, I was getting frustrated because I wanted to get it done now. I wanted to do this, I wanted to do that. And then over time, I started learning patience, where you just do a little bit at a time. Maybe have 3 or 4 items next to you where you do the skin tone on this item, you work on the eyes on that item, you paint the hair on that item. And then before you know it, it's coming together slowly and it's getting to where you want it to be. It's all about just, you know, the tools, the paint, the patience, and it'll just come together over time. So this is a really great item too if you're really new to the hobby and you want to just dive in, you want to start learning stuff but not actually worrying about putting arms together, hands, trying to paint little trinkets to the items, and you just want to focus on the bust of an item. This is a great starter item. Even though you might think it's not, it is. You can, you know, it's big, you can work on the skins, you can work on the eyes, the lips, and you could just work on these details, and it's just easier. I find that for me, the bigger the item, the easier it is, and the smaller the item. But it worked out pretty well. So I did finish the feathers. They got like a bluish greenish tint to them. Just basically painted streaks on them, and it kind of works out really well where it doesn't take away from the item, but you can tell there's feathers there and it's different from the hair. So that worked out pretty well. Horns all finished. Now you can see in the eyes, what I liked by putting those iridescents in the eyes, it kind of grabs the light. So you could probably see somewhat that as you turn it, it sort of grabs that light and it makes them glow a little bit. So iridescents are great like that. You know, you can just run with those iridescents and you can make things really pop and go from there. Now you can see the cheekbones, we brought those out, the eyes, shadow, everything, the lips, and just kind of did a nice good blending of the skin, just make it as like fine and velvety as best as I could. Now the jewelry makes it pop a little bit more, but it's not as overly done. You know, it doesn't really take away too much from her. Now I know I put those metal earrings in her ears, but that's kind of just me. I like to do customizing stuff like that, so it kind of, you know, makes it pop a little bit more, just for preference. You don't have to do that, but you can if you want to. And, you know, the base is kind of this bluish marble base where it doesn't really take up too much of your eyesight. You really focus more on the figure than anything. So that is pretty much it. That is the Ava Denizens of Zo bust from Garagekits. It is an absolutely amazing piece. I suggest that if you're new to the hobby, you want to really practice on something, this is a great item. If you're a veteran and you want to kind of dive into a little bit more, this is definitely an item to pick up. Now me personally, since I like to customize, if I was to pick one of these up, I might even, like, you know, go the route of where I wouldn't even have a ponytail, maybe resculpt some of the hair and try something different. If you are new to the hobby, don't feel that you have to paint it this way. You can do a fairer skin. If you're a fan of Psylocke and you want to do more of a yellowish skin, you could do that with purple hair. You can do a fair skin like Rogue, where you can do fair skin and brown hair with a white streak. You know, maybe, you know, she's an air elemental and you figure, you know what, I want her skin to be a little bit more whitish. You know, maybe you want to do whites, blues, and grays and make her look like she's almost a ghost, and the hair could be, you know, a blue or something, and you can maybe, the eyes could be blacked out. You know, there's just tons of options out there, and you can run with it and do whatever you want with these items, so you don't have to do what's here. If you have a favorite character out there from X-Men, DC, anime, and you like the way those characters are colored, you can use that palette on this item and have fun with it. So there's tons of options out there, but it's a really great item. So I want to thank Garagekits for sponsoring the series by sending this out with a bunch of paints. Hopefully a lot of you new guys out there to give you guys some more tips. some ideas on how to do stuff. Hopefully some bets out there too. Maybe this kind of helped you out maybe with some colors or painting or whatever. But that is Ava from Denizens of Zo from Garagekits. Thanks for watching the series. Be sure to check out Garagekits for a lot more products coming. Their paints. I think they got a lot of tutorials as well coming out too, as far as like PDFs and stuff. And they probably will be hitting up the Wonderfest shows again once that stuff starts up again after the lockdowns, and just hobby keep the hobby going. So thanks for watching, and we'll be back with some more videos.